Welcome to So True, and the devotional today is entitled No Substitute for Hard Work, and it's based on the text of 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, that comes from the pen of the Apostle Paul. Let me read that text. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. But I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. There's an old story about a preacher who was driving down a country road when he spied the most beautiful farm he had ever seen. And so he decided to stop and take a further look. It was picture perfect. He could tell it was an old farmhouse and farm that had been remodeled and renovated, but what a job had been done. The flower beds that ringed the house were magnificent. The white fence that lined the driveway was stunning. The fields were beautifully tilled, and a fine herd of fat dairy cattle were grazing knee-deep in the pasture. The house was something you'd find in a magazine, and the rustic red barns with their white accents belonged on a postcard. It was then that the preacher noticed the farmer on a tractor, hard at work, but approaching the place where he stood by his car. When the farmer got close enough, the preacher flagged him down. Stopping the tractor, the farmer shouted a friendly hello. The preacher said to him, "My good man, God has certainly blessed you with a magnificent farm." There was a pause as the farmer took off his cap, and then addressing the preacher, he said this, "Yes, God has, and we are deeply grateful. But you should have seen this place when God had it all to himself." Now, I know the story is a little blunt, but it is a good reminder that God does not normally choose to work independently of human agency. You can go to 1 Corinthians 12, 4-11, and you'll see that God has given each of us gifts, different abilities, different activities, and God works in and through them all. God works, but he works in and through his people. Paul acknowledges in Philippians 2, 12-13, that as he works out his own salvation, it is God that's working in him. And so as God works in him and through him, Paul works out the perceived will of God. God expects man to exercise dominion under his lordship. That's the creation mandate of Genesis 1-28. So the point is this, and the point of our story, although kind of bluntly made, is this. In God's kingdom, there's no substitute for human endeavor and hard work. Yet in some Christian circles, there is a theology and a temptation to, quote, leave everything to the Spirit. It is said that our one job is to get out of the way of the Spirit of God and let him do the miraculous and let him do the marvelous. The outcome of this is that Christians are discharged from putting their hand to the plow. That would be Luke 9:62 if you want that image. They are sidelined from playing any significant role in advancing God's kingdom through clear thinking, good planning, and agonizing work. Yet, as Canadian Baptist pastor Rob Roxburgh wisely states, quote, renewal and church life in general is not all a matter of being blessed. Most church success stories have as much perspiration as inspiration behind them, in the sense that members have worked hard to establish structures and strategies that will fulfill the prompting and vision of the Spirit. I like that. Don't miss that insight. Ministry success stories have as much perspiration as inspiration behind them. Now, a qualification must be made. While acknowledging that ministry is always a response to grace, an effect of grace, it must be stated the effect of grace is always hard work. The result of God's work in us is a total commitment with every fiber of our being to God's work. While divine inspiration precedes human perspiration, it never abrogates or relegates it. Because of God's grace, Paul labored more abundantly than most. We read that at the start of the devotional, 1 Corinthians 15, in verse 10. And another verse that kind of echoes this point I'm making is Colossians 1:28-29, where because of God's mighty work in Paul, he worked mightily. So listen as we close. Our work can never be a substitute for God's work. I want to underscore that lest I'm misunderstood. But God's work in us teaches us that there is no substitute for hard work. God may give the increase, but we have still got to water and we've still got to plant. 1 Corinthians 3 verses 7-8. Farms look better. Marriages become stronger. Churches grow larger when we spill some holy sweat. There just is no substitute for hard work. So let's get after it. God bless.